What?
Hi everyone, my name is Lisa Cotton and I work on our Prevention and Awareness program here at Covenant House, Toronto. Welcome to the third installment of our series of Facebook Live broadcasts on sex trafficking. Tonight we have a special session for parents and we'll be talking about how engaging in dialogue with your kids at home can help protect them from being lured into sex trafficking. And we have a special guest with us tonight, Rhonelle Bruder. Rhonelle is a survivor, a parent, and an advocate, and she'll be sharing with us some practical, real-life examples and tips of how to not only broach this topic with your kids, but also how to keep the conversation going. And we also have our Associate Director of Communications, Tracy LeBlanc, and Tracy will be fielding your questions, and we'll do our very best to get to as many of them tonight as we can throughout the broadcast. Rhonelle, we're really pleased that you can join us tonight. So maybe we can start off with just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, and thank you for having me. So I'm a human trafficking survivor, an advocate, and the founder of the RISE Initiative, a grassroots project to support vulnerable youth. And that's through a series of skills-based workshops. And I had the pleasure of volunteering here at Covenant House last fall with the Rogers Home and presenting some of my workshops here to the girls.
Oh, welcome. We're glad to have you tonight. Rhonelle, we know that a lot of Canadians believe that sex trafficking is only an international issue and that is not something that could happen possibly to their own kids. But we know, and it might be surprising to a lot of people, but that over 30% of the youth that we serve that have been trafficked reported that they were living at home when they were first lured into sex trafficking. So it is really an issue that is happening to Canadian families every day. Yeah. Can you tell us what does sex trafficking look like in Canada today?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point because there's a lot of misconceptions about sex trafficking, and a lot of people kind of have that idea of the movie Taken, with the idea, of a young girl being kidnapped at gunpoint, being held against her will. And while that does happen, when we think of domestic trafficking, particularly here in Canada, many times young girls are being lured online. They're being lured in malls. They're being lured anywhere, at schools. And so it doesn't necessarily look like what you see in the movies.
And what's the difference between sex work and sex trafficking?
Yeah, so sex work is choice, right? So when you think of sex trafficking and sex works, there's the element of choice. So when an adult decides that they want to work in the sex industry and they make that choice, that's different than when someone is forced, manipulated, or coerced into working in the sex industry and someone is taking that money from them. And I would also add that anyone under the age of 18 cannot make the choice to work in the sex industry.
And so it's our hope that through today's session that you as parents can build your own knowledge about sex trafficking, but also that you can take home some practical tips that you can apply at home with your kids to start helping keep them safe. And it's been through our own work with survivors that we've come to learn that there are some common denominators when it comes to who might be at greater risk for sex trafficking. And that might be that someone's life is in turmoil, and that could be at home with their friends or at school. And oftentimes there's also this unmet need that the trafficker uncovers and then uses to exploit them, to lure them, and then to keep them entrenched in trafficking. So how do these findings relate to your own experience as a teen?
Yeah, so I think in my case, I was experiencing homelessness. I was living in poverty. So I had a lot of vulnerabilities that my traffickers were able to exploit. But I will say that that's not always the case with every child that's lured into trafficking. And even if you were to ask my parents, they would actually tell you that they were surprised because I was actually considered a good kid. So my parents would often say to me, you were the one that we didn't have to worry about because I was a straight A student. I was on the track team. So seemingly from the outside, everything was going good with me in my life. However, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, just a lot of self-doubt, low self-esteem. And so I was hurting and I was looking for that sense of belonging and that need. So even though it may not have been obvious to people on the outside, that still was going on with me sort of inside.
And how do pimps take those vulnerabilities and use them to their advantage?
Yeah, and so in my case, because I was looking for that sense of belonging, that sense of a family, that connection, and then also just looking for protection, my traffickers presented themselves as that. They presented themselves as friends, as people that had my best interest in mind and wanted to take care of me and also wanted to give me that sense of belonging.
So we did a research study last year nationally, and we talked to teen girls 13 to 16 years old and their parents. And what we wanted to understand was, are there certain behaviors or attitudes that put those teens at greater risk for being trafficked? And what we learned is that those teens that were more familiar with sex trafficking and aware of its risks, then they were more likely to take steps to ensure their own safety. So it seems like there is this critical window of time that we have to educate our children about the risks of online luring and sex trafficking, and before the risk factors increase. Yes. And then of course we also know that, the older that teens get, the far less likely they are going to be talking to their parents about challenging situations. So at what age did you start having the conversation about sex trafficking with your daughter?
Yeah, so with my daughter, I was having conversations just in general in regards to sex and just predators and what she had to look out for when she was really young. Because I was a single parent and I had to work and I had to go to school, so I was really busy, and that meant she had to stay with babysitters or with family and friends. And so I had to have those conversations with her early on. But as soon as I gave her a cell phone, which I think was probably about 10 years old, I was having that conversation with her about sex trafficking and being lured, particularly online, because I knew she had access to social media. I just wanted to make sure that she knew what sort of the signs were and what to be aware of.
And how do you keep that conversation going over time?
So it's something that continually to this day we talk about. And I like to sort of leverage what's going on within the media. So when I hear a story or something's on the news about sex trafficking, to me that's another opportunity just to open the door and have that discussion again, just to sort of reiterate a lot of the conversations that we've had, but just to make sure that she knows and that she's constantly aware.
That's great advice. So we've learned from survivors that often there were a lot of barriers in their way that either prevented them from recognizing that they were being lured or preventing them from leaving once they were being trafficked. And those were things like sometimes they didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like, or they didn't have this big picture understanding of what was happening to them, or the right vocabulary to talk to somebody about it. And then oftentimes they told us they were embarrassed to ask for help and they didn't know where to turn for help. So what advice do you have for parents to help them equip their own kids with the tools that they need to stay safe?
Yeah, and I think that's really where the awareness and the education piece comes in again, because if a child doesn't know what's going on, if they don't sort of have that language to describe it, they may not understand that they're being trafficked. They might think that this is a relationship and someone that has a romantic interest in them. I think another important thing is to really talk about what a healthy relationship looks like. I think we assume that young people just know naturally what a healthy relationship is, but they don't. I think it's important for them to understand boundaries and, not doing things that you're not comfortable with. And that if you have any sort of just gut instinct that something doesn't feel right, just to trust that.
Another thing that the study told us was that the more that parents were engaged in their kids' social media activity, then the less likely those kids were to engage themselves in risky online behavior. So how do you navigate those murky waters of social media with your teen?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one because it's a balance. You want to give them their own space and you want to make sure that they know that you trust them. But at the same time, we're parents and we have to look out for them and protect them. So with my daughter, she has a cell phone, she has the iPad, but I have all the passwords. And so she knows that I have the passwords and that if I ever feel the need, if I have any sort of concerns, that I will check all her social media accounts. I think that, having a cell phone, having social media, this is a privilege for young people. So it's not sort of a need. So I think to reiterate that to your children that, it is a privilege to have social media. And if a parent feels that there's any sort of concern, they have every right to look and to search their child's social media.
And do you have any practical tips, Rhonelle, for our viewers in terms of creating safety plan or things that they can take home and start doing with their kids immediately?
Yeah, I think one important thing is to have that sort of go-to person, so that trusted adult that they can talk to, and that may not always be you. So your child may not feel comfortable talking to you, but just so they know that they have someone that could be an aunt, it could be a family friend, but someone that you trust and they trust that they can go to if there is a concern. And then also, I like the idea of having a safety word. So if by chance your child's out somewhere and something happens, they're not comfortable and they just need you to come get them, they can just say that safety word to you and that's it. You'll come, you'll pick them up, no questions asked, no judgments. I think it's really important to make sure it's a judgment-free zone, because as soon as kids feel that they're being judged, they're going to just shut down. They're not going to want to open up with you again. So it's important to just say, you know what, I'm here and I'm listening.
And I guess that's really important because that helps keeps the door open for future conversation,
Yes,
which is really what we want. So when they're in that challenging situation, then that door is open for them to broach the subject with you. Is there any other advice that you want to leave parents with?
Yeah, I think I would just say, you know, I said it before about your children just trusting their gut instinct. And I think it's also important for parents to trust your gut instinct. You know your child better than anybody. So if you start to see changes in their mood, in their behavior, maybe all of a sudden they're hanging out with new friends, or you're just seeing something different, address it. Talk to them. If you feel that they're shutting down with you, maybe have them go talk to someone else, maybe a professional, but just trust your own gut instinct. If something doesn't feel right, it's better to be safe than sorry.
I guess that's something also that we can teach our kids, like you said, right?
Yeah.
Is to trust their gut. Maybe we could talk a little bit about the signs of luring and what parents might want to look for in order to understand if there's something that they need to be concerned about.
Yeah, so I think a couple of the signs that you'll notice is if all of a sudden your child has new friends in their life or a new boyfriend, but that they don't want to introduce you to them. So start becoming really private and not wanting to talk to you. You might notice a change in their mood and their behavior. You may notice all of a sudden they have very new expensive jewelry or bags or clothes that would be, you know, sort of out of line for a young person to be able to afford this kind of merchandise. I think another thing too that you might notice is just they're staying out late. So maybe they're breaking curfew, or you're just seeing changes in just the way they're acting. Perhaps now you notice that they're skipping school and their grades are dropping. So all this kind of like little signs that you start to see that just something doesn't feel right with your child.
That's what I was going to say. Oftentimes there's sort of this change in behavior, and that's why you have to listen to your gut, because it's only something that you would be able to notice from your child. And yes, they might be more secretive and not telling you where they're going, or want to be secretive about their new boyfriend and not introduce them to the family, things like that. And are there certain things that also we could look for, teach people to look for with their peers? Because sometimes, you know, they can't tell that something's happening to them themselves, but it might be something that they can see in a friend. Yeah,
and I think that's good because it's important for young people to, you know, look out for themselves and protect themselves, but also to protect their friends. And so if they start to see changes in their friends' behavior, they all of a sudden notice that their friend has a new boyfriend or new girlfriends that they're hanging out with that they don't want to include them with. If they start to see changes in their mood, they're not coming to class anymore, all of a sudden they're coming with expensive clothes and things like that. Like the same things that parents can be aware of, also other young people can notice within their friends. And if they do, I would say, go to a trusted adult and tell them.
Yeah, it's really important. You want to talk to your friends, but you want to make sure that you talk to that trusted adult so that they know what kind of action to take.
Because at the end of the day, a young person just may not know what to do. So it is important that they know to talk to a trusted adult if they have any sort of suspicion that their friend is being trafficked.
Rhonelle, when you're talking with other parents, is there anything in particular that you focus on or that they ask of you and want to know about?
Yeah, I think a lot of times parents, I think it's tricky because I think a lot of times parents, they just can't see this happening to their child. You know, so a lot of times I hear parents say, well, you know, my child, they're doing great in school. Everything's going good for them. So I just don't see this happening. And what I try to tell them is that when a child has vulnerabilities, or if they have insecurities, or maybe just they're suffering from low self-esteem, they may not tell you that. They may not even know how to tell you. So even though on the outside, seemingly things may be going well for them, they could be hurting inside. And this is why it's important to keep that conversation, keep that door open, so that if they want to talk to you, if they want to talk to a family friend, somebody, if they're hurting, they know that there's someone that they can talk to.
That's great advice. Thank you. Yeah, so thank you, Rhonelle. We're so pleased that you were able to join us tonight, and we hope that everybody learns something valuable about this really important topic. We want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and we want you to know that if you suspect that you or someone you know is being trafficked or requires immediate assistance, to please contact the Toronto Police Services Human Trafficking Enforcement Team at 1-416-808-2222. And this event can be viewed on our page, so please share it with your family and followers. And there's much more to keep talking about on this issue, so please join us for our next event on May 31st, and we'll be talking about some action that you can take to help put an end to sex trafficking in your own community. Thanks again, Rhonelle, and good night, everyone.
Thanks.